Unbeknownst to Olivia Caldwell, the man she'd just publicly humiliated was the silent force behind the very company about to seal her $800 million deal. "You're unworthy to be in my elite circle, Hunter. You reek of poverty and failure." The stinging words, delivered with a cruel flourish, echoed in the grand ballroom as Olivia punctuated her disdain by dousing her husband's face with crimson wine. Investors, cameras, and 200 stunned guests bore witness to the spectacle. What followed was a swift and merciless unraveling that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, betrayal, marriage, sacrifice, and the brutal sting of revenge. Viewers, imagine being in Hunter's shoes. What would you do if your spouse poured wine on you in front of everyone? Share your reactions in the comments below. The Crescent Hotel ballroom shimmered with the warm glow of amber chandeliers, their light reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking panorama of the Dallas skyline. The air, thick with anticipation, carried a subtle fragrance of expensive champagne and naked ambition. Reporters jostled for position near the stage, their cameras flashing like a swarm of fireflies as Olivia Caldwell, the celebrated CEO of Caldwell Design Group, took her place at the podium. Her silver-gray dress, a masterpiece of understated elegance, caught every available ray of light, making her appear almost ethereal. This was her night, the culmination of years of relentless dedication and unwavering focus. Her company had finally landed the coveted $800 million urban renewal contract with Trident Infrastructure Holdings, a deal that would catapult her into the stratosphere of Texas's most sought-after female CEOs. The governor's deputy, prominent industry leaders, and a host of deep-pocketed investors filled the hall, their attention laser-focused on the woman who had transformed humble sketches on diner napkins into towering architectural marvels. At a table discreetly positioned near the back of the room, Hunter Caldwell observed the scene with quiet intensity. His hands were folded neatly in his lap, his expression an inscrutable mask. He wore a simple, impeccably tailored navy suit, the kind that allowed him to blend seamlessly into any crowd. There were no ostentatious displays of wealth, no monograms, no designer cufflinks, nothing to betray the substantial fortune that lay hidden behind his calm, watchful eyes. For years, he had been Olivia's steadfast supporter, her silent champion. She often joked that he was too decent, too honorable for the cutthroat world of big business. In Olivia's eyes, Hunter was a kind, unambitious husband, a source of stability, but certainly not a source of power. When the host's voice boomed through the sound system, announcing, "Ladies and gentlemen, the signing ceremony is about to begin," a thunderous wave of applause erupted. Olivia smiled graciously, reveling in the warmth of the admiration. As she stepped down from the podium, her eyes met Hunter's. He rose from his chair and walked toward her, a glass of champagne held lightly in his hand. He spoke softly, his words intended for her ears alone. "I'm proud of you, Liv. You worked hard for this." Her smile faltered, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. "Hunter, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you sign," he replied, his voice even. "You've earned this. I'm proud of you." A few of her colleagues turned, their curiosity piqued. She forced a brittle laugh. "That's sweet, but this is a corporate event. You can congratulate me at home." She paused, then cut him off before he could speak. "You thought wrong. These are people who make billion-dollar decisions, Hunter. They don't live in your world." A ripple of murmurs spread through the tables. A waiter, poised to pour champagne, froze mid-action. Hunter's gaze remained unwavering. "I'm not trying to embarrass you," he said quietly. "I just wanted to stand with you for a minute." Her cheeks flushed crimson, pride giving way to a surge of irrational anger. She snatched her own glass of red wine from a passing waiter, her voice tightening until it trembled with barely suppressed venom. "Stand with me? You can barely stand for yourself. You're unworthy to be in my elite circle, Hunter. Look at you. You're poor. You stink of mediocrity. You have no class. Do you see these people? They wear power. You wear failure." A collective gasp swept through the room. The room stilled, every eye fixed on the unfolding drama. She lifted the glass higher, her hand shaking slightly. Maybe this will help you remember your place. The wine struck his face in a shocking crimson burst. Cold, deliberate. It splashed down his cheek, staining his collar, and trickled in thin streams onto the pristine marble floor. Gasps turned to a horrified silence. A photographer's flash exploded at the precise moment his head turned slightly from the impact, immortalizing the moment of utter humiliation. Next time, she hissed, her voice like shards of ice. Learn to stay within your circle. Hunter didn't flinch. Not a muscle moved. The wine dripped from his jawline, a single droplet landing with a faint splat on his crisp white cuff. For a long, breathless second, no one in the hall dared to breathe, let alone move. Slowly, methodically, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a pristine white handkerchief, and wiped his face. Then, with a quiet dignity that cut deeper than any shouted accusation, he spoke. His tone was level, almost conversational. I understand. Then, he turned and walked toward the exit, the crowd parting before him in stunned silence. The only sound was the measured echo of his shoes on the marble floor. Olivia watched him go, her heart pounding, her chest tight with a heady mix of adrenaline and a perverse sense of satisfaction. Someone muttered, "That was harsh," but she ignored it. She tossed the empty glass onto a nearby tray, took a deep breath and straightened her dress. "Let's continue," she said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to her own ears. "My husband gets emotional around success." The host hesitated, visibly shaken, then nodded awkwardly. "Of course, if everyone could please return to their seats." She turned back toward the stage, lifting her chin defiantly as the cameras resumed their relentless flashing. She smiled at the crowd, projecting an image of unshakable composure, as if nothing of consequence had just transpired. Outside, on the steps of the Fairmont Hotel, Hunter Caldwell paused beneath the soft glow of the streetlights. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over two numbers already cued on the screen. His expression was unreadable, devoid of both anger and hurt, replaced by a chilling sense of purpose. The heavy door closed behind him, muffling the polite applause that had resumed inside. Inside, Olivia Caldwell continued to smile, oblivious to the fact that her cruel words had just unleashed the quietest, most devastating storm of her life. He dialed the first number. "Pierce," came the tight, professional voice on the other end of the line. "Terminate the contract," Hunter said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Yes, sir," Pierce replied without hesitation. "Effective immediately. Announce it now." "Yes, sir." Hunter ended the call. He scrolled down his contact list and tapped another number. "Hayes speaking. Withdraw all Black Elm capital funding from Caldwell Design Group. Every account, every subsidiary," Hunter instructed, his tone calm and measured. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell. Send confirmation to my private email when done." "Yes, sir." Hunter lowered the phone and gazed up at the night sky. The street lamps reflected off the glass facades of the nearby buildings, painting abstract lines of amber across his face. The wine had dried stiff on his collar, but he no longer cared. Inside the ballroom, the orchestra had transitioned to a slower, more celebratory tune. It would not last another 5 minutes. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, straightened his jacket, and walked toward his car. Inside, the applause swelled again. Olivia lifted her chin a fraction higher and smiled for the cameras. The host's voice rang out through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight marks a historic partnership, a venture worth $800 million between two of the most dynamic firms in the nation. Let's hear it for the visionary leading this new era." The room erupted in cheers. Olivia's pen gleamed between her fingers, poised above the folder embossed with gold trim. "Mrs. Caldwell," the host said, handing her the final document with a practiced smile. "If you'll do the honors." She smiled wider, basking in the incandescent glow of the moment. "It's an honor," she said smoothly. "A moment we've worked years for." She was just about to sign when a man in a charcoal suit hurried through the line of tables, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. An assistant whispered something to him, and his expression changed instantly, the blood draining from his face. He nodded once, then made his way to the front, the sharp click of his shoes cutting through the celebratory applause. The host faltered mid-sentence. "Sir." The man leaned toward him, his voice low but urgent. The host froze, his eyes widening in alarm. The crowd began to murmur, sensing that something was terribly amiss. Olivia frowned, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. "Is there a problem?" The man straightened, cleared his throat, and said carefully, We've just received an order from the executive office. The contract signing is suspended." Her pen paused in midair, hovering just above the signature line. "Suspended? What are you talking about?" "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, his voice tight with barely concealed anxiety. "The directive came through less than a minute ago. We're to terminate all proceedings immediately." "That's impossible," she snapped, her voice laced with disbelief. "There must be some mistake. The CEO wouldn't cancel a deal like this without notice." "I wish there were." He nodded to the other executives, who were already rising from their seats, exchanging bewildered glances and frantically checking their phones. The buzz in the hall shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to a palpable sense of panic. Photographers lowered their cameras. Champagne toasts were abandoned mid-raise. Someone whispered, "What happened?" Olivia looked around, her heart hammering against her ribs. No, this doesn't make sense. Who gave the order?" No one answered. The representative hesitated, his eyes darting nervously to the side as if searching for an escape route. Then he said quietly, "It came directly from the top." Her throat tightened. "From the top?" "Yes, ma'am." The words landed like stones around her. Chairs scraped back as executives began gathering their folders and laptops. The lights that had felt so warm and inviting only moments ago now seemed harsh and merciless. Her assistant rushed forward, her phone trembling in her hand. "Olivia, something's terribly wrong. We just got an email from Black Elm. They're withdrawing all their investment." "What?" Her voice cracked, the carefully cultivated composure finally crumbling. "It says, and I quote, 'Effective immediately, all funding support has been withdrawn. Future communication not required.'" It came from the director's office. Olivia stared at the screen, the words blurring before her eyes as her pulse thundered in her ears. "That's not possible. They're our anchor investor." The assistant's voice shook. "Not anymore." The man from Trident closed his folder with a definitive snap and turned to leave. "I'm very sorry, ma'am. I'm afraid we're done here." Olivia's knees felt weak. "Wait!" she shouted, her voice echoing in the suddenly cavernous space. "You can't just walk out. We had an agreement." But he was already halfway across the floor, his back ramrod straight, his pace unwavering. A few guests glanced back at her with pity, but most simply hurried toward the doors, eager to escape the unfolding catastrophe. The microphone still hung in front of her, amplifying her ragged breathing. The contract lay open on the table, her signature line empty and untouched. The cameras continued to click, each flash feeling more intrusive and accusatory than the last. Her lover, Daniel, moved toward her, whispering urgently under his breath, "Liv, we need to go. Something's happening. Something we don't understand." She shook her head, still staring blankly at the documents. No, this was supposed to be mine. They can't just take it away from me." But the ballroom was already emptying, the remaining guests leaving in hurried whispers, the waiters unsure whether to pour or clear. The air, once thick with the scent of celebration, now smelled faintly of wine and mounting panic. Outside, beneath the same chandeliers that had illuminated her moment of triumph, the shards of the glass she had thrown still lay scattered across the marble, a small pool of red wine soaking into the seams. Olivia's eyes found the broken glass, and her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. The sounds around her began to fade, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in her ears. She sank slowly into her chair as the last members of the Trident team disappeared through the doors. The applause, the speeches, the dazzling lights, it was all gone, as if it had never happened. In that cavernous silence, she whispered his name, barely audible. Hunter. And somewhere far from that room, Hunter Caldwell leaned back in the plush leather seat of his car, the city lights sliding across his window like fleeting ghosts. He closed his eyes and allowed the quiet to settle around him as the first alerts from Trident's internal system began to roll in. Inside the ballroom, the final echo of forced laughter faded into the clinking of abandoned glasses, and Olivia Caldwell realized with chilling certainty that she had built her entire world on a foundation owned by the man she had just humiliated. Hunter Caldwell drove through the quiet, tree-lined streets of Highland Park with the windows slightly open, letting the cool night air wash over him. The city lights streaked across the windshield in long, golden lines. His hands remained steady on the wheel. No music, no phone calls, just the soft hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of the road. At a red light, he reached up and loosened his tie. The faint, lingering scent of wine clung to his shirt collar, now dried and slightly sour, but he didn't bother to change. The light turned green. He drove on. When he pulled into the driveway of his home, the motion sensor lights bathed the front of the house in a warm, inviting glow. Everything looked exactly as he had left it, calm, ordered, untouched by the evening's turmoil. He hung his jacket neatly on the rack in the entryway, walked into the kitchen, and poured himself a glass of water. The house was silent, a deep, resonant silence that felt both comforting and profoundly lonely. He leaned against the cool marble countertop, took a long sip of water, and exhaled slowly. His phone buzzed softly on the counter. A text message from Pierce confirming that both orders had been executed. A second message arrived almost immediately from Hayes, confirming that all withdrawals were complete and that the market would respond accordingly by morning. He didn't reply. He simply set the glass in the sink, turned off the kitchen light, and walked down the hallway to the master bedroom. He loosened his shirt cuffs, sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, and stared out the window at the dark expanse of the Dallas skyline. Then, without another thought, he lay back and closed his eyes. Sleep came easily, a welcome escape from the day's relentless drama. Across town, Olivia Caldwell sat frozen in the back seat of Daniel's car, her body shaking uncontrollably. The glare of the ballroom lights still burned behind her eyelids, the stunned faces of the guests, the hushed, anxious voices, the representative's chilling words. The order came from the top, replaying endlessly in her mind like a broken record. "Liv, come on," Daniel said gently. "You can't stay here." She didn't move, her eyes fixed on some unseen point in the distance. Her lipstick had faded to a pale outline, and strands of hair had fallen loose against her shoulders. The pristine white of her dress was now marred by faint red stains from the wine she had so carelessly thrown earlier in the evening. "Olivia," Daniel said again, his voice softer this time, "let's get you out of here. You're in shock." She blinked, her voice barely a whisper. "Everything just stopped." "I know. Let's get you to my place." He gently helped her from the car, his arm a steady presence around her shoulders. Cameras still flickered sporadically from near the hotel entrance, reporters lurking in the shadows, desperately trying to piece together what had just transpired. The laughter that had filled the ballroom hours ago was gone, replaced by hushed whispers and a pervasive sense of bewilderment. Daniel opened the passenger side door of his black sedan and guided her inside. She leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, staring blankly as the city lights streaked past, their reflections stretching like dark bruises across the surface. He drove without a word, no music, no questions, respecting the profound silence that had enveloped her. The roads were nearly empty at this late hour. When they reached his apartment downtown, he helped her inside. She sank onto the plush velvet couch, still wearing her heels, her hands trembling uncontrollably in her lap. Daniel went to the kitchen, poured her a glass of water, and placed it carefully on the coffee table in front of her. She didn't drink it. She just stared at the faint ripples on the surface, lost in a sea of shock and disbelief. "It'll make sense in the morning," he said quietly, trying to sound reassuring. Even though he didn't believe it himself, she shook her head, her voice barely audible. It already doesn't. He didn't answer. He went to turn off the overhead lights, leaving only the soft glow of the city spilling through the sheer curtains. When he turned back, she was still sitting there, motionless, her eyes fixed on nothing, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her body trembled each time she replayed his voice in her mind. Enjoy the celebration, Olivia. You'll need the light where you're going. Sometime near dawn, she finally drifted off to sleep on the couch, her makeup smudged, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand. By morning, the world had already decided her fate. Her phone buzzed incessantly, dozens of notifications lighting up the dark screen beside her. She stirred groggily, her eyes puffy and swollen from a sleepless night. Daniel stood by the window, phone in hand, his expression grim. "Liv," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "You should see this." She sat up slowly, rubbing her temples, trying to clear the fog from her mind. "What is it?" He turned the screen toward her. Every major business news outlet was emblazoned with the same shocking headlines. Asterisk Trident Infrastructure cancels $800 million partnership minutes before signing. Asterisk Mysterious investor withdraws full funding from Caldwell Design Group. Asterisk Caldwell Design Group faces backlash after CEO poured red wine on husband at gala. Her eyes scanned the words in stunned silence. Each headline struck her like a physical blow, leaving her breathless and disoriented. She grabbed her own phone, her fingers fumbling with the lock screen. Hundreds of unread messages. Dozens of missed calls. Her social media feeds were already flooded with clips from the previous night, her laughter, the splash of wine, the stunned silence that followed. Someone had filmed everything. In one particularly damning video, slowed down and zoomed in for maximum impact, the wine arced gracefully from her glass in a perfect crimson arc, hitting Hunter's face with a cinematic precision before he turned away. The caption beneath it read, "She poured wine on her husband at her own signing." 10 minutes later, the deal vanished. Olivia's hand trembled violently. No, this can't be happening." Daniel's voice broke softly through the oppressive silence. "It's everywhere, Liv." She pressed her palms against her forehead, her chest rising and falling unevenly. The room felt too small, too bright, suffocating her. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to her personal catastrophe. Cars honked, sunlight streamed through the windows. Life continued as normal, all unaware that hers had ended the night before. Across town, Hunter Caldwell woke without the jarring intrusion of an alarm. The house was still, filled with a deep, pervasive silence. No phone calls, no urgent messages, no noise from the outside world to penetrate its walls. He stood, stretched, and walked barefoot to the kitchen. The glass he had used the night before was still on the counter, faint fingerprints smudged around the rim. He poured himself another glass of water, took a slow, deliberate drink, and watched as the morning sunlight crawled across the pristine marble floor. His phone vibrated once on the counter. He glanced at the notification, a cascade of news alerts, trending headlines flashing across the screen. His name was mentioned in places he hadn't seen it in years. He didn't open them. He didn't need to. The doorbell broke the silence. A single, discreet chime, followed by another. He set the glass down carefully on the counter and walked toward the front door. When he opened it, Olivia stood there. Her eyes were swollen and red-rimmed. Her lipstick faded to nothing. The ivory dress from the night before was now creased and dull, clinging limply to her frame. She looked exhausted, defeated, like someone who had run out of both options and explanations before even trying to speak. "Hunter," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I come in?" He didn't say a word. He simply stepped aside, allowing her to pass. She walked past him into the living room, her heels clicking softly against the polished hardwood floor. For a long moment, she just stood there, arms crossed tightly against her chest, looking down at the floor as if trying to regain her balance. Then, she turned to face him, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "Everything's gone wrong," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The contract, the investors, everything. It's like the world just flipped overnight." Hunter didn't respond. He leaned casually against the wall, his arms folded across his chest, his face an unreadable mask. "I don't understand it," she went on, her voice laced with panic. "One minute we were celebrating, and the next, the representatives just stopped me. They said there was an order from above to terminate the contract." She attempted a weak, watery smile. "You know how these things go. Maybe it's a misunderstanding, right? Someone probably messed up the paperwork or sent the wrong instruction. It'll clear up. It has to." Hunter's expression remained unchanged. She rubbed her temples wearily, pacing back and forth across the living room rug. And then the emails came in. Black Elm pulled every investment. The accounts are frozen. The stocks are crashing. The press is already having a field day. "Hunter, I don't even know where to begin." Still nothing. He remained silent, watching her with an unsettling stillness. She looked at him pleadingly, searching his face for a flicker of compassion, for the familiar comfort she had always found in his presence when things went wrong. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. I needed you." Hunter walked past her to the kitchen and poured her a glass of water. He placed it on the table between them, but made no move to encourage her to drink it. "You didn't sleep," he said quietly, stating the obvious. "I couldn't." She sat down heavily on the couch, her hands shaking as she gripped the glass, but still didn't drink. "It's bad, Hunter. Really bad. I've never seen anything like this. It's like someone just pressed a button and erased my life overnight." He studied her for a long, silent moment, his gaze unwavering. "Someone?" She nodded weakly. "I don't know who. Maybe a competitor. Maybe someone from the board. I'll find out. But Her voice cracked, her carefully constructed composure finally crumbling completely. "I just needed to tell you, like I always do." Hunter walked to the window, his back to her. The morning light caught the side of his face, outlining him in pale gold. He turned slowly, his voice calm and even, betraying none of the turmoil she knew he must be feeling. "That's what you get when you bite the hand that feeds you," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I gave the order." For a moment the world seemed to stop. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You what?" The words landed like a physical blow. She froze, staring at him as if the air had been sucked out of the room. You did this?" He nodded once, his expression unwavering. "Trident doesn't work with arrogance, and Black Elm doesn't invest in people who humiliate their own partners." Her voice broke, cracking under the weight of the revelation. "Trident, Black Elm." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. "You really never asked where the funding came from, did you? Or who owned the company you were so desperate to impress?" Her knees weakened, and she swayed unsteadily. "Hunter, I believed in you," he said quietly. "I built your company from the shadows. Every investor, every introduction, every check, it all came from me. Through a trust, through Black Elm. I thought I was helping you grow, helping you achieve your dreams. But last night you showed me what you really thought of me." Tears streamed down her cheeks, blurring her vision. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I swear I didn't know. You didn't care to know." She shook her head vehemently. "Hunter, I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. Please let me fix this. Let me talk to whoever you need me to. I can apologize. I can rebuild." He cut her off with a sharp gesture. "You can't fix this. Please." Her voice was barely a whisper now, a desperate plea for mercy. "Don't do this to me. Don't let me lose everything. You can pull the order back. You can call them." He exhaled slowly, almost sadly. "You poured wine on me in front of a room full of people, Olivia. You called me poor. You told me I wasn't worthy to stand beside you. And the entire city watched it happen. Tell me, what part of that do you want me to undo first?" She sobbed uncontrollably, stepping closer to him and gripping his arm with desperate strength. "Hunter, please. I was stupid. I let pride speak for me. I love you." He looked down at her hand, then gently but firmly pulled away. "You love what I gave you, not me. "That's not true," she cried, her voice cracking with anguish. He picked up the empty glass from the coffee table and placed it in the sink. "You once said I didn't belong in your world. You were right." She backed away from him, shaking her head in frantic denial. "No, don't say that. We can start over. I'll do anything. I'll leave the company. I'll—" He turned toward her, his voice calm and final, brooking no argument. "You can't start over from something you destroyed yourself, and you won't get a second chance at something I've protected." "What do you mean?" "The trust," he said simply. "Everything I own, every company, every share is under an irrevocable trust one created before we married. You can't touch a dime of it. Not in divorce, not in settlement, not in court." Her breath hitched in her throat. "You're divorcing me?" "I've already called my lawyer." The words hung in the air between them, hollow and devastating. She staggered back a step, gripping the edge of the couch for balance. "Hunter, please, I'll sign anything. Just don't leave me with nothing." He studied her face for a long, quiet moment, his expression unreadable. "You already did." Her lips parted, but no words came. The silence between them was so thick and heavy it seemed to swallow the room. Outside, a bird landed briefly on the window ledge, its wings catching the sunlight before it flew away. She dropped to her knees, burying her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, Hunter, I'm begging you. I can't do this alone." He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Then he said softly but firmly, "You should have thought of that before you threw wine on the man who built your future." He turned away, walked down the hallway, and closed the bedroom door behind him, leaving her alone in the shattered remnants of her carefully constructed world. Olivia remained where she was, kneeling on the floor, the sound of her sobs echoing through the quiet house. The water glass sat untouched on the table, sunlight glinting mockingly off its pristine surface. For the first time, she understood what true silence meant, when even forgiveness had left the room. Viewers, do you think Olivia deserves a second chance after what she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping, true-to-life stories.